Well, hello and welcome to this, the Thursday, or as we like to call it around here, the Friday Eve edition of the Todd Veinotte Show. I'm Dan Alstrand. Glad you're able to spend a few minutes with us as we roll through this real first work week of 2026. Everybody getting back into their routines, and it's been a roller coaster when it comes to the weather, right? We started the week with people ice skating and it being darn cold. And then yesterday, it was like the skies opened up like it had never rained before. I knew there was a rainfall warning in effect, and I knew that we were expecting some rain. But that was a pretty intense storm last night. And it rained for several hours at a pretty good intensity. So I was downtown in downtown Halifax last night taking care of some business, and boy, the water was running down the hills, and there were a lot of soaked people on their way home yesterday who were dealing with all of that weather. We're going to connect up with Allister Aalders a little bit later in the show today to get his thoughts on what that storm was and where it came from, and we'll get some rainfall amounts for you as well, and maybe a sneak peek into what we can expect moving into the next work week here as we roll forward on our Thursday edition of the program. It was certainly wet, and some of that turned into a more of a treacherous drive this morning. There was some black ice in my neighborhood when I made the trek in this morning to the office, and I know that many of you were reporting some slippery conditions out there as well. In fact, Lunenburg County, the conditions were severe enough that the school board down there closed some of their schools for the day. So I guess outside of HRM, if the temperature got to that magic zero mark, we had some freezing rain, and some of the roads, and particularly the backcountry roads were a little bit treacherous, I guess is the word, and they changed some bus routes and canceled some classes as a result of it. As I understand it, all of HRCE schools and bus routes are all running normally today, but in the outlying areas, of course, things a little different. We'll keep our eye on what's going on with that as we move forward here on the program. We have a busy show planned for you today. I'm glad you're able to spend some time with us here and join the show. 11 o'clock today, of course, we're going to open up the telephone lines. We're going to continue the conversation that we've been having all week on the open hour. It's, of course, regular rules apply. You can talk about anything that you want to talk about, but the big story for me today was the Nova Scotia Power hearings yesterday. So reading this story from the CBC this morning, and I'm paraphrasing here, but it appears that the brass at Nova Scotia Power are not available for questioning during this public hearing on the rates. I understand that the CEO, Mr. Gregg, was at the tribunal yesterday and apparently had a conversation or two with reporters before the whole thing kicked off. And then just kind of sat in the back as an observer. And those that were making presentations or appearing before this public hearing were unable to ask any questions. I've been talking about this for the last couple of days. And when it comes to these kind of public hearings with these utilities, it feels like they're just checking boxes, right? It feels like they're not taking them seriously, if that's the right way to describe that. Why have a public hearing if we can't ask questions of the people who make the decisions? We're going to spend some time on the Nova Scotia Power rate hearings today. We're going to have a conversation in hour number 3 with the leader of the official opposition here in Nova Scotia. That, of course, is the NDP Leader Claudia Chender. And very shortly, we're going to connect up with Iain Rankin, the Liberal leader, who both appeared before this committee yesterday to raise their concern in opposition to these proposed rate increases with Nova Scotia Power. It's frustrating. It makes me angry that we have these mechanisms. These mechanisms are put into place so that we have the ability to question those in power. We have the ability to try and change their minds on things. And then it's like they're going through the motions. It just doesn't, it seems that it's It's probably following the letter of the law and probably following the rules that are out there, but it certainly isn't the spirit of it. And I was quite frustrated to hear that yesterday. We'll open up the telephone lines for you after 11 o'clock to see what you have to say about that. Very quickly, before we head off to our first guest today, we've talked about our children a lot here in Nova Scotia, and particularly with things like social media and their time that they spend on those devices, right? It's interesting. I mentioned I was in downtown Halifax last night, yesterday afternoon and into the evening. And I walked by a couple of coffee shops and student hangouts, right? And it's almost to a person that people are sitting around and they have their heads buried in their phones. Well, Rogers, of course, the parent company of this radio station, has done a study that shows that youth, and I think they're probably at the most at risk, but youth aged 11 to 17 spend 5.2 hours a day. Think about that for a minute. 5.2 hours a day on their phones. Now, according to the Canadian Pediatric Society, the sort of benchmark for recreational, they call it, and that kind of makes me laugh, but recreational screen time is 2 hours a day. But this new study from Rogers showing that youth between the ages of 11 and 17 are spending 5.2 hours a day on their phones. Now we know that Vanessa Veinotte has children, and I know that her kids use their phones, but they're not as addicted as many are. But you don't have to look far to see it, right? And I'm not picking on kids here. I mean, adults are as addicted, but young brains are still developing. There's a bunch of problems according to the CPS. That's the Canadian Pediatric Society. With extended amounts of screen time, it's an impact on mental health. Can cause things like anxiety and depression and social isolation. You can walk by a coffee shop on Barrington Street, and the place has got many people in it, but nobody's talking. They're sitting across from one another, and they're not having a conversation. They're scrolling on their phones. Physical health, more screen time. The longer your face is buried in that phone, the less time that you're physically active, right? I'm not physically active enough. I don't think many of us are. But you can see how the one leads to another. And there's cognitive issues, according to the Canadian Pediatric Society, that higher screen time can hinder academic performance and development. And Dr. Rob has talked and touched on things about this using the AI and those kind of things that can create issues. 9 out of 10 parents, in the same study that Rogers did, 9 out of 10 parents think that youth are spending too much time on their phones. 90%. Canadians don't agree on anything. But 90% think that their kids are spending too much time on their phones. And only 1 in 3 think that screen time's a problem. So they know that their kids are spending too much time on their phones, but they don't think that the screen time the length of screen time is a problem. Rogers is launched I think it's a $50 million program that they're going to try to combat this, and there's a bunch of things that they're doing digitally, but they're also going to launch a national in-school program, I think it's called, where they're going to bring some athletes. George Springer comes to mind as one of them. To try and engage teenagers in having real-life conversations, not only virtual conversations, but real-life conversations about their screen time. And I will, of course, say once again that Rogers is, of course, the parent company of this radio station and this radio program. But holy smokes, right? 5.5 hours. Like how teenagers, and maybe teenagers are different now. I don't have any, but teenagers are asleep for most of the day, aren't they not? At least they were when I grew up. You went to school, then you went home and had a big nap, right? So, like, that's a significant chunk of a day is 5.5 hours. Anyway, we'll keep you up to date on this program as it rolls out. Our next guest that we'll bring on here is propose some legislation that would maybe limit some of the screen time for kids. When he proposed that we ban social media use for youngsters. That didn't go anywhere, but certainly had the conversation starter. That, of course, is Iain Rankin. He'll be our guest when we come back. You're listening to The Todd Veinotte Show. I'm Dan Ahlstrand. Turning off my phone. We're back in minutes. 2026 isn't very old, but already we're into the big discussions, and some of these discussions are going to lead to significant increases perhaps on some of the bills that you pay every year. And there's a list of them that we've been talking about for several weeks. We talked about water. We're talking and continuing to have the discussions about taxes. But the one that's at the forefront this week, of course, as public hearings continue on a proposed rate increase at Nova Scotia Power, is your electricity bill. And one of the people that was at the hearings yesterday was the leader of the Liberal Party here in Nova Scotia, and that is Iain Rankin. And Iain joins me on the phone this morning. Iain, how are you?
I'm great. How are you doing, Dan?
Not too bad. Is it true that you guys can ask questions of the brass of Nova Scotia Power at these hearings?
That was revealed while we were at the committee. I was the senior counsel that asked the question to some of the Nova Scotia Power panel about not having the availability of the executive team, they're called, and the note was that was the first time in their memory that that's ever happened. So that's my understanding, is that this is the first general rate application hearing where the CEO and literally none of the senior executive team was available. They had a bunch of other panel members and a few staff people available, and Mr. Gregg was in the room. I think you mentioned that on your show. So it's a first. It's atypical. It's you got to ask questions of why.
It's got to be frustrating, man.
Yeah, I mean, we've had Mr. Gregg at committee, and he's made himself available to legislators to answer questions around the cybersecurity breach, and I'm not sure the angle of why he wouldn't make himself available in front of the panel to be cross-examined. It's quite a process down at the Energy Board. There's a lot of evidence-based information that can be really scrutinized. So we would like to see the senior people that are ultimately making major decisions in how the utility operates and where they're getting cost recovery from being present.
You were there yesterday, Iain. The leader of the NDP was there yesterday, but conspicuous by his absence was the Premier or the Energy Minister.
Yeah, there's a lot of atypical things happening there, I guess, because I think the government has participated in past hearings. So it was just us, the NDP, and the Affordable Energy Coalition as interveners, and it was good to have the opportunity to give some, yet again, more ideas of how we can control this. But from the outset, we wanted to make clear that we oppose this 8% increase over the next couple of years on top of the already close to 20% that has gone through. It's really outstripped inflation, and it's a big part of our cost of living issues that families are facing every single day. And I thought it was important that we be present, and we're hearing as MLAs from people virtually every day about trying to keep up with some of the bills escalating, and they're coming in almost, it seems, year after year with more and more requests of Nova Scotians to pay more.
Right, and more and more questions being raised about reliability and then, of course, cybersecurity and so on and so forth.
Yeah, and I mentioned quite a range of challenges in my submission. So there is the reliability piece, and this is part of why they're asking for more from ratepayers to strengthen the grid, things that we thought that should have been more prudent decisions early on. So these are related to our idea around the full review of looking at how Nova Scotia Power operates and decisions they've made and how we can find cost savings. And the government has asked for an investigation, which was part of our request around the review on the overestimated bills. So that's an important piece, but we want a more comprehensive look at that. It's within current regulations, and if we can get more information on how Nova Scotia Power operates, and from an independent perspective, I think that we can drill in and try to bring some of these requests that are outstripping the ability to pay for Nova Scotian families.
I think Nova Scotians understand that the cost of goods increases every year, right? I think we understand that things go up. I mean, we see it every day when we go to the grocery store or to wherever it is that we're purchasing things. And you're asking for some kind of stability when it comes to rate increases.
Exactly. I think when you look at most successful private companies, they look at a 5 to 10 year plan of where their costs are going. You know, the provincial governments look at 4-year plans on their projections. So the utility should be no different. We shouldn't see an increase go through and then have them already start working at coming back and asking Nova Scotians to pay more. They've came back recently to deal with fuel costs escalating. So they've got some more from ratepayers from that, from a cost recovery perspective. If there's storms, like some requests could have some reasonable impacts, and the utility, obviously costs are going up for all businesses, but this request is beyond inflation, and they've just got an increase recently. So Nova Scotians are tired of just seeing year after year them coming back for more when they should be absorbing some of the cost overruns through their own shareholders rather than coming to ratepayers because they didn't foresee a certain cost implication in a future year. And that's the specific idea that we brought forward yesterday, trying to help the Energy Board with options. We've seen other jurisdictions look at this multi-year plan. And yes, the utility would have to absorb costs that are above and beyond what they projected.
Iain, is it time that we take a real close look? You mentioned investigation earlier, like a real close look at the relationship between this province and Nova Scotia Power?
Well, I think that's what a review would be able to do. I think it's important. We brought forward, I think, at least 5 or 6 new ideas and new bills on how we can put forward performance standards and how we can look at ensuring that new transmission is not owned by Nova Scotia Power, and we do have an independent system operator, and I think there's going to be some good work happening there in how we build out any new transmission as well. But I think that, you know, Nova Scotia Power has their guaranteed rate of return. That should be looked at. I think, you know, given today's context, is that appropriate? A certain amount of percentage that they get when they spend money on capital, and what incentivizes them to do that? So they neglected to build some of the cheapest form of energy, which is wind, over the last decade plus, and they've relied on more volatile sources of fuel. And so they come back and they say, well, coal prices went up. We need to buy more coal from other province, and we're going to charge ratepayers for it. And that's exactly what a full review would do. Together with, if they did that and they looked at a more multi-year plan at the Energy Board, we think that we could actually make some real progress as long as we can work together on this.
At the end of the day, Iain, do you think that this rate increase is a done deal, or do you believe that the Energy Board will listen to the interveners here and to the people of Nova Scotia by extension and say no?
Well, I have to remain optimistic in the work that we do as legislators. I from the time that I was actually there yesterday, listening to the board asking questions, they are delving into the details. I hope people recognize that they are actually doing some good work down there, asking questions around certain methodology that's used for coming up with the formula and cost recovery. So I have to have some hope. I think we have to recognize that there will be an impact to power bills, but our job as opposition, and should be the job of the new Minister of Energy, is to try to take action. There's a number of things that the government can do, and as opposition, we can help elevate the voices of your listeners that are challenged with these bills. Double, triple bills that are estimated. We know that extra revenue comes in benefits Nova Scotia Power, and what's happening with that. So I have to have some optimism, but it's going to be a challenge for the board to make this decision.
It's and I'm sure you hear it every day, Iain, that the power rate increase, the water rate increase, the potential tax increase here in HRM as council goes through that budgeting process. People that call this show are frustrated.
Yeah, cost of living is going up, and even governments, their provincial government's spending more than $1 billion over what's been approved by the legislature. So it's hard for them to scrutinize a private company when they can't, manage their own books. And I know people are frustrated with the way governments operate and with the way utilities that have a hold over a domestic market are frustrated, and I share their frustrations, and we'll do our best to fight for them, and we'll see if we can control some of these costs.
Do you think? Can you see? Would there ever be a way that that the utility would be brought back under public control?
Well, the question is, would it operate better under public control?
Right.
We have that next door in New Brunswick. We have that in many places where rates are also under review and having challenges. And Halifax Water is not a private company, and there's huge challenges in the way that operates. So I'm not sure that spending the multiple billions of dollars to buy that back. But what I do believe in, and I've put forward this in legislation, is that any new major transition should be tendered. Nova Scotia Power shouldn't have that automatic option to build it, because that's where they actually earn that guaranteed rate of return, and that's why they've always advocated to build more transmission and capital. So I hope that any new major transition, and we need it to build out for offshore wind and other sources, and we get batteries and more solar and things like that, that we have opportunities for other ownership, that we can continue to have some competitive forces out there in the market.
Iain, I appreciate your time, sir.
All the best, Dan. Thanks so much.
That is Iain Rankin, the leader of the Liberal Party here in Nova Scotia. In hour number 3 today, we will continue the conversation with the leader of the NDP, who was also part of the interveners yesterday at this unprecedented, can I call it that? Unprecedented hearing yesterday where the brass, the decision makers, the people that are responsible for coming forward with this 8% increase in electricity rates over the next 2 years are not able, not required to answer any questions from people that are intervening on the behalf of ratepayers of you and I, of Nova Scotians on this file. It's absurd. We're going to take a break, continue the show on the other side of it. We're going to get an update from Blake on the news here on the program. On the other side of that, we haven't talked about the old library downtown in some time. Now, there's going to be a presentation on the future of the Halifax Memorial Library. Chair of the Friends of the Halifax Memorial Library is William Breakenridge. He'll be joining us after the break. You're listening to The Todd Veinotte Show. I'm Dan Aalders. We're back in minutes. Back. It's the Friday Eve edition of the Todd Veinotte Show as we roll forward. I mentioned again, last night I was in downtown Halifax and I walked by the old Memorial Library, and I know many people have been asking a lot of questions about that building and its current state and what should be done with it. We know that there are some restrictions to that property, being that it is in fact a memorial. And a lot of people know what we can effectively do with that building. There's going to be a free presentation on the Memorial Library this coming weekend on the 12th from 6 until 8 at the Central Library, which is just up the street on Spring Garden Road. And I'm very happy to welcome into the show today to tell us a little bit more about this library and what we can do with it is a friend of the program. We haven't spoke to him in a while, and that's historian William Breakenridge. William, how are you?
I'm great. How are you, Dan? It's lovely to be on.
It's been a minute or two. Now, I guess the first question, William, is there, because of that building and because of its history and because of the property that it's on and being that is in fact a cemetery, we're pretty limited what we can do with that site, isn't it?
Well, first off, there's a lot of issues with it for sure. However, if you work with what's there, there's a lot that can be done. The past things that have gone on with trying to look, oh, maybe we can do this, maybe we can do that, always tried to expand out of the building form. So, really you have to work with the community, with history, with remembrance. Those are the key things there. And that's what I'll be covering in my talk, is to look at the past, present, and future of it and really have an open conversation, trying to get the community really involved and say to the government, well, this is it. You've got a report that you spent supposedly $100,000 on that's going to be coming to council in the coming months, probably late the summer, and looking to start a process. So what we're trying to do here as some friends of the Memorial Library is get people ahead and give some information to those in charge to say, hey, the people really do want some. And on the social media and that, I have had huge responses of people saying this is so important for our city. It's a geographic connector between Spring Garden Road and the rest of the downtown. The memories that are there, the history that needs to be told and has not been told through those places, as a poplar's grave and a building that was marked as a living cenotaph, an actual cenotaph to those who fought in the wars. This is real Halifax history, and the limitations are what we believe is there, but we can always work within that. I have a saying is that an old building tells you, you don't tell it. And if you follow that, then you will get something very productive out of it. And I believe that as a community center is where the approach needs to come for the building. That's my own personal thought on that. And I think that there are many other definite ones, getting these feedbacks in from a lot of people. I see that there's an energy there and it needs to be let out. So that's why we're having this event, and I'm giving the full history of the whole site and not covering anything out of it. It's going to be right there in the face kind of deal. And there's a lot of things that maybe might be uncomfortable to talk about, but it needs to be addressed.
William, that building has been empty, I think, for almost a decade now, has it not?
It has, and that is part of the issue. But, we don't know what state things are in. From what I can see as someone who walks by it daily, it's looking pretty solid. I mean, there is an abandonment issue there. But overall, I think that up until about 2022, the heat was still on in the building. So with any building, there's a renovation that has to be done. With any building, you look downtown, you look across Halifax, that's being done. I don't think that that's the issue with it. I think it's more of a willpower issue, and really saying, okay, we need a real action and let's get this going, because we can't let it sit there any longer like that.
Would you be able to expand its footprint, or with some of the things you described earlier, is it kind of set in its size and shape?
Respectably for the property and everything there to honor its history, what's there is there.
Right.
And I would not say to expand the footprint, because that would mean other adjustments and more costs. And I am trying to make sure that that's all within reason and sensibility. And really the province has not recognized it as a past burying ground or not legally. So in that context, the grounds are only known as a park area. That's what it was zoned. At one time, before we had gotten it registered as a heritage site, it was considered, half of it was considered downtown zoning. You could build up to 49 meters at one point, but that has all since changed since 2024, and getting the building and the site all registered as a heritage place, that has all changed. And that took a lot of work on my part, on a lot of other people's parts as well, to get that really working. And it's good because we got an archaeology study out of it. We got recognition of some sort and more knowledge from people, but still there's a lot of people who do not know the ins and outs of that.
That property was the paupers burying ground. There's lots of people buried there.
Yes, how and where exactly on the property they are, they could, and most likely the property lost an acre of land from the reports around it, so there could be graves under the sidewalks and streets because Spring Garden Road was widened and Brunswick Street didn't exist to that length that it does now. Where Doyle, that was created much later after the closure of the poorhouse on Spring Garden Road. So it was a very different looking time and place. It was actually called the Workhouse Road because it wasn't always called Spring Garden Road either. There's a lot to it.
William, I've heard people talk about the Central Library, obviously, since it closed. Some suggesting that would it be better? Would it serve the purpose better for the building to be demolished and that area turned into a park?
I understand that, but I will be speaking to some reasons why and how, because that has to interlink with the potential burials and the disruption that was caused when it was all built and all of that connector. I don't want to spoil it. But,
right. I'm not going to steal your thunder.
But there is a connectivity issue there, and it is better from speaking with professional archaeologists, as I have had. I've done my homework on this, to what you see is what you get. If you work with that and leave the building alone and just repurpose it, adaptive reuse to something community-wise in place of remembrance, then you will be more respectable to the potential of the burials that are there or disruptions that are there. So that's a very critical point for me personally.
William, any idea? I know you haven't been inside, and it's probably difficult to say, but what would cost to make that building habitable again?
Well, I mean, the past ranges that the city has come up with was 10 to 20 million, but they haven't really done their homework on that, and government overspends and a lot of issues. I would personally really demand here a totally independent arms study, allow someone else to go in there and as a real engineer and all of that with real experiences to go in and do a real assessment outside of government eyes, because government always overspends and overcosts. That's just another, it's easier to say, an exorbitant number, so then you don't have to do it. And that's what we're trying to say here is there's been no real assessment like that, and that's part of this process.
Friends of the Halifax Memorial Library is having this presentation on the history of the Memorial Library on Monday. That's from 6 until 8 at Paul O'Regan Hall at the Central Library on Spring Garden Road. William, thanks for joining us today, and best of luck.
Thank you so much.
That's William Breakenridge. He's a historian and part of the Friends of the Halifax Memorial Library. It's a very interesting situation, that library, because it was, as William said, was built as a living cenotaph, right? And with all of the memorials that are attached to that, and the place of solemnness, for lack of a better word. But it's also built on paupers' burial ground, and there could be thousands of graves underneath there. So there's what we can do with that site is very limited, be interesting to watch and to take in that presentation again on Monday at the Central Library from 6 until 8. Going to take a break. On the other side of it, boy, did we get some rain last night. Our meteorologist, Allister Aalders, will be stopping by. You're listening to The Todd Veinotte Show. I'm Dan Alstrand. We're back in minutes. Back. The Thursday, or as we like to call it, because it sounds better, the Friday Eve edition of the Todd Veinotte Show. I'm Dan Alstrand. Glad you're able to spend a few minutes with us as we roll forward. And the sunshine that we saw earlier today is starting to disappear. Looks like we're getting some more cloud cover coming in here, and it's just been a roller coaster of weather this week, has it not? It's that old Nova Scotia saying, if you don't like the weather, just wait 5 minutes. That kind of was what this week has been like. We started off the week when it was frigid cold. Then we saw the temperatures moderate yesterday, and then, the skies opened up, and we had, like I said earlier, it's like it never rained before. I know that our next guest was watching the weather patterns very closely and might have some information on some numbers for us. And that, of course, is our meteorologist here on the program, Allister Aalders. How are you, sir?
Good, Dan. How are you?
I am well. Maybe I misread everything, but I knew we had rain coming. I knew there was a rainfall warning, but that rain was pretty strong for a long period of time yesterday.
It was heavier than, what was forecast for the Halifax area. Most of the guidance was showing that there could be an area of some heavier rain. It looked like through the valley into parts of northern Nova Scotia, but we obviously did see that become more widespread along the Atlantic coast, and it did last a bit longer than, it really wasn't expected, as I said, to begin with. 50 millimeters is what we ended up with at the airport, and much of Metro had upwards and in excess of 50 millimeters. And the general forecast before the rainfall warning came out late yesterday was about, 10 to 20 millimeters. So we did end up with more than expected. And the downpours, when they did develop, did linger for quite a while in the evening. I did receive, reports of some localized pooling and flooding, and even some flooded basements last evening. So, not the best weather to be contending with, especially at this time of year. Just, as you mentioned, it has been a colder start ahead of this rain, so the ground frozen and the ground not able to absorb this rain, especially when it's falling so heavily as it was last evening, just causing a number of issues and making for really not a great night here in HRM.
I can tell you that it caught a lot of people because there was a lot of soaked people looking for buses and walking home yesterday afternoon in HRM.
Yeah, we were expecting the rain, kind of into and through the evening, which, the timing of it did come in as scheduled. But, yeah, just the rainfall rates that we did experience certainly were not forecast. Thankfully, not a lot of wind with this system, so if people did have the umbrella, hopefully that did help a bit. But pretty hard not to get soaked when it's raining as hard as it was last night.
Is a rainfall that significant in January here in HRM and in Nova Scotia? Is that normal? Is it abnormal?
Well, we certainly, it just depends on the system and the track. We're not necessarily we do see systems that roll through in January that can bring rainfall, and the thresholds for rainfall warning criteria are lower in the winter, as I mentioned, because of factors like the frozen ground. So, I'm not quite sure how it works under the new system with the color-coded alerts, but previously it was 25 millimeters of rain in the winter versus 50 in the summer triggers a rainfall warning. So, I mean, we do obviously see them from time to time in the winter season. This was a relatively fast-moving system to have, upwards and in excess of 50 millimeters of rainfall in really just a short period of time. Not as common for January standards here in Nova Scotia.
And only a couple of degrees could have made that much worse if we would have got closer to the freezing mark.
Well, exactly. I mean, we were near, 2-3 degrees yesterday evening. And a lot of what the radar was catching for most of the day was some, it was looking like heavy radar returns, but it was snow aloft. So it was pretty close to being a snow event. And of course, this was really, I've been using the term, kind of mixed bag because, there was freezing rain and snow on the leading edges over parts of northern and eastern Nova Scotia. PEI had a mixed bag of weather. Same with New Brunswick. They didn't end up with a significant amount of snow in New Brunswick, but I mean, had the system have tracked perhaps just a bit farther south and there had been some colder air available, we would have been talking certainly possibly about more shoveling than, runoff. But obviously, the concern today has been, some did receive some accumulating snow through the overnight, especially in the north and east. But, the concern for some this morning, especially outside of the city on those gravel and dirt roads, was how slippery the roads did become. And now potholes, too.
Right. I heard there's East Uniac had quite a pothole this morning.
I'm hearing that same pothole, and I mean, unfortunately, just with this kind of cycle, this freeze thaw now, if you will, we're going to, I think, see a few more of them start to pop up.
Allister, I don't want to steal your thunder from tomorrow's segment, but what are we looking at in the next couple days?
So tomorrow, the rest of today and tomorrow, relatively fair. Another system comes in Friday night to Saturday. That's another rain system, fairly fast moving, and I don't think as much rainfall compared to this system. Saturday is looking really nice by the afternoon. A windy day, but sunshine comes out in 8 degrees for the high. Not record breaking, but unseasonably mild. And then another system rolls in Sunday with possibly a bit of an icy mix on the leading edges, and then that turns into another rain event for the rest of Sunday and Sunday night. Overall, the big story, I mean, obviously these systems are coming through with rain, but it's because of the mild temperatures, which, the normal high for this time of year is about 0, and we will be above freezing for the rest of the week into the upcoming weekend, aside from some nighttime lows, including tonight down to -4 and at times back close to the freezing mark through the weekend. But it's relatively mild for this time of year, and that will be continuing into next week, although the possibility that we start to see the returns of more winter-like weather during the second half of the month.
As long as we don't have to shovel it, right?
Hey, I mean, at least you don't have to shovel the rain, although, hearing mixed reviews about this weather that's moving through. Some people, if you're not a fan of the cold, you're probably liking this weather, but if you're a fan of winter activities, I look outside and there's not any snow to be found, so we will certainly, snow lovers will have to hope for not only colder weather, but a storm track that favors snow rather than rain for the second half of the month, or at least into February, to partake in those activities. Although it sounds like places like some of the ski hills, where of course they've had the natural snow, but the man-made snow too. It sounds like they've had a decent start to the season, so hopefully this hasn't been impacting those hills too much. But obviously a lot of industry impacted by the unseasonably mild temperatures negatively.
Always on the weather watch, Allister Aalders. I appreciate your time, sir.
Sounds good, Dan, and we'll talk again tomorrow.
You betcha. That is Allister Aalders, our resident meteorologist. As we get into January, and rain is uncomfortable and it soaks you to the bone. And it was a cold commute home for some yesterday, but at the end of the day, we didn't have to shovel it, right? Time to take a break. We're going to get an update on the news on the other side of it. We're going to open up the telephone lines for the open hour. Regular rules apply. You can bring anything to the table that you'd like to talk about. Looking forward to hearing from you. I'm also looking forward to hearing from you about this decision yesterday at the hearings into these power rate increases to prevent the brass from Nova Scotia Power from answering any questions. Truly, what is the point? We're back after the update. All right, welcome back. This is the open hour. The lines are open. 902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. As we always say here during our open hours, the regular rules apply. You can bring anything that you'd like to the table and start a discussion, continue a discussion. 902-405-6000 or 1-877-801-8255. Some of the issues of the day I'm interested in your thoughts on, if you're willing to share. That is after day one of the Nova Scotia Power rate increase hearings. We've heard from Liberal leader Iain Rankin, and we've heard from others who were at the meetings yesterday that the brass, the decision makers, the executives within Nova Scotia Power have or will not or are not being compelled to answer any questions with regards to this power rate increase at these hearings. There's others there that will, lawyers and so on and so forth, but the actual executives, even though most indications are, and I've seen photographs of the CEO of Nova Scotia Power, Peter Gregg, being in the room as an observer, but not being compelled to answer any questions. And it just goes back to what I've been saying about these kind of hearings for the last couple of days. I know that these are put out here to give the public, to give interveners an opportunity to raise concerns, to bring the concerns of ratepayers, of taxpayers, of you and I, and of regular Joes and citizens to these hearings. But really, it just feels like they've become a box that needs to be ticked off, and you just do it because you have to, and really nothing's going to change with regards to it. And by having the brass at Nova Scotia Power not being able to answer questions at this time, which from what Iain Rankin told us is unprecedented, at least in his knowledge, and to my knowledge is unprecedented. It's one thing after another with this utility, isn't it? 902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. Let's go to the phones. We welcome Nicole back to the show. Nicole, how are you? Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
Can you hear me?
I can, loud and clear. How are you?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm well.
Well, you'd think I'd be calling about Nova Scotia Power, but I'm not. But I think the topic actually lends itself to what we're seeing at Nova Scotia Power. And I just wanted to follow up on the conversations that you were having yesterday about Ozempic. Mm-hmm. And the reason I feel compelled to have this conversation is because usually when we're talking about Ozempic, we're not talking about it in the way that I think it was intended to be used, which is for diabetes. We're usually looking at the weight loss side of it.
Right.
And when we're looking at the weight loss side of it, we're getting into really emotionally charged territory where predatory practices can take over. And as someone who has experienced a 100-pound fluctuation, as someone who knows what it's like to be very uncomfortable in your body and to try everything and anything out of desperation to see results, I want to be very careful when we have these conversations, because between the ages of 13 and 33, I physically harmed myself in ways I never had to. And it was only once I got to the point that I could get so radically honest with myself and stare in the mirror long enough where I could see that I was the only common denominator of my life, and that nothing was going to change unless I chose differently. So whatever I was choosing wasn't going to change. And when you had the doctor on yesterday, she kept citing the research. And when we're being asked to trust research or trust science, what we're actually being asked to trust is the publishing mechanisms through which they come through and become visible to us. And what no one has been talking about for quite a while is the fact that on September 12th, 2024, 2 law firms filed a massive class action antitrust lawsuit in New York against the 6 major scientific journal publishers. So Elsevier, Springer Nature, Taylor Francis, Sage, Wiley, and Wolters Kluwer. And the allegation and the class action was filed actually by all of the researchers who contribute to these magazines and publications. And the allegation is simple. It's that these companies are accused of extracting billions of dollars from a system that's publicly funded and intended to serve research in the public good. So what the research is actually alleging is that, first, scientists are required to do peer review for free. So basically these publishers are running like a sweatshop. So the scientists have to do the peer review for free. They have to write the papers, review each other's work, act as editors without pay, and that unpaid labor is essential to their system. But the publishers are charging, these are billion-dollar companies. They're making billions of dollars every year because they are selling the work of these researchers. Second, the researchers are only allowed to submit a paper to 1 journal at a time, and it's considered exclusive submission, which means a study can sit in review for months, sometimes more than a year, and if it's rejected, that researcher has to start all over again. There are researchers that have been trying for 10 years to get their research out. So 10-year-old research is being considered current today, which is a highly problematic issue in itself. And then third, the researchers are also restricted from sharing their findings while they wait. They have a gag order on them. So during the peer review process, the publishers who can sit on it for years are also gagging the scientists from freely circulating their manuscripts as a preprint, something that hasn't been fully peer reviewed, just so that anyone can look at it. And then once that paper is accepted, the researchers are required to hand over all of their publishing rights to the publishers, who then charge for everything. Now, the lawsuit's alleging that these practices violate U.S. antitrust, and they're seeking for significant damages and an end to these anti-competitive agreements. But it's much bigger than this, because at the end of the day, these researchers, and if you speak to any researcher, I mean, these are good people with good intentions that are operating inside of a fundamentally broken system, because these publications hold the trajectory of their future. If they cannot get into these papers and get their work published, as a researcher, what are you doing? What are you actually contributing to? But they're burning themselves out, not only doing their own research, but attempting to peer review all of the other research. And researchers are dropping like flies right now because of that. And as someone who has gone through extensive burnout, where my body has shut down, my adrenals have shut down, I was not a trustworthy source while I was burnt out. So when we're looking at the research, I really want people to maybe start looking at research as a tool that you use to orient and navigate around, to learn how to trust yourself, and not placing just implicit blind trust into research and into these studies without digging a little deeper. Because while the intentions are really good of the people that are in there, unfortunately, good intention cannot compensate for a really broken structure. And the majority of my work and what I look at always focuses on how systems fail structurally and not necessarily the intentions of the people working in them. And so I say that to also say to the Nova Scotia Power issue, we have all of these what appear to be bad actors. I'm not saying there's any good intentions happening with Nova Scotia Power, but these bad actors are allowed to sit there because of the structure that they're inside of. The structure is permitting it. So the Ozempic conversation is a big one, and I think it's one that needs to be handled with a lot of care. And I think that we need to start just being a little more cautious with our words and not necessarily outsourcing our authority and our self-trust into some of these organizations that are showing that they're just fundamentally not trustworthy. And after the great trust the science wave of 2020, I think more than anything, we must look at this, because while they were telling us to trust the science, this lawsuit is showing us that they were asking us to trust science that was significantly outdated and potentially unreliable. And there hasn't been a lot of movement on this case. I have been keeping an eye on it for the last year and a half. And it looks like they're going to keep it stalled in the courts for quite a while because these publications have the means to do it. But I'd be really curious to hear if there's any research. We have a ton of researchers. Dalhousie University is a beautiful launch point for a conversation like this because their researchers are actively trying to get into these publications. They can speak to the machine that they're stuck inside of and how that impacts and affects what they study, how they study, and also the trajectory and the speed at which certain short-term funded studies may make it to the forefront really quickly because it serves an economic goal, i.e. Ozempic, than something that takes a longer, slow process because we need to see the results over time. And so what is this research actually serving? What are these publications serving? And so when we hear trust the research, trust the science, I want people to now hear, do I trust the publication method? Because you only see that research through the publisher. And there is a serious issue with that publisher. So just like we only see what's happening with Nova Scotia Power through the lens of the UARB, because that is how it has been constructed, it's why you don't have a contract. It's why an average citizen cannot get intervener status. I should be in those intervener meetings right now. I have a significant and made a substantial case for intervener status and cannot have it granted. I was told that my power has been vested by the UARB into Pink Larkin to speak on my behalf.
Right.
And that's absolutely not just or fair. So that system is broken. And if we keep trying to argue them inside of that structure, it's not going to work. Just like the science here, if we keep trying to rely just on the science that these publications are showing us, where is it actually taking us? If we follow exactly what the UARB is telling us we're supposed to follow, where is that actually taking us? And again, no one can still say that the contract that binds us to Nova Scotia Power is lawful or valid. So it actually makes that intervener, to me, this whole intervener hearing actually looks like a hearing between just Nova Scotia Power and the province, which it is, but it actually has nothing to do with the ratepayer. It has to do with whatever that underlying agreement is that was formed back in 1992 or 94 when the public utility was sold. It's that. There's something rotten at the core in that agreement that can be undone if there's someone brave enough and courageous enough to look at it and willing to, as I said the other day, be in pursuit of truth even if you don't like how it makes you feel, in order to start building the trust that we need.
Thank you, Nicole.
Go. Yeah. Thanks, Dan.
902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. We're back after the break. Welcome back. The open hour continues. 902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. Those are the lines. That is the number. 902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. Back to the phones. And we welcome James to the show. James, how are you?
Fine, thank you. Good morning. Yes, Nova Scotia Power. Where to begin? The list of problems you have spoken of, and it's well documented, but just very briefly for the record, the service is terrible. We have more outages than we should. And again, the research, there are statistics to support that, but we've all experienced those very inconvenient power outages, often in the wintertime when it's particularly impactful. So the service is poor. The price is high and they want it to go higher. We do pay already 30% more than the Canadian average. Lots of statistics around that too. And they want an 8% increase over 2 years. Poor service, high price. They can't even keep our data safe. Massive cybersecurity. Now they say every single customer probably. And they've had 6 months to fix it. They haven't fixed it. We can't get our meters read properly and billed properly. Lots of detail around that, but that's aggravating. And in some cases, people are receiving inappropriately high bills. And Nova Scotia Power says it won't affect their credit rating. We'll see. So the problems are numerous and well documented and significant. This is not small potatoes. Solutions have been thrown out there. Perhaps, fire the senior executives. And the CEO sat in the room but was afraid to sit in the big chair, and testify or be available to answer questions. Even the lawyer for the Nova Scotia Energy Board, Bill Mahody, who's been doing this for a long time, said he hasn't seen this in his 21 years of being in that room as a representative of the public or the company or the board or whatever. So yeah, I mean, they can't even do public relations correctly, never mind service and price. So it's a mess. What do you do? I think we should follow what just happened in Calgary regarding their water utility, their water department. They've had terrible service, major water breaks. They just had another one coincidentally recently. But what they did was they appointed a totally independent expert panel to do a thorough study, and they just released their report yesterday, I believe it was, this week. And it proposes major changes to the way they run their water service in Calgary. I won't go into the detail, but I would think a similar approach is needed here. We don't have the instant solution that will please everybody, or we would implement it tomorrow morning. It's time to dig into this thing big time. Iain Rankin proposed it when he was on an hour ago, and I believe the leader of the official opposition, Claudia Chender, has also, and I believe she's coming on next hour, I believe she has also proposed such a study be done. This is too serious. It affects every single Nova Scotian. It also affects our economic development. These high power rates discourage companies from coming here. Never mind, and then I'll stop, never mind that Nova Scotia Power is not doing any proper long-term planning. They mumble about energy transition and green energy. Meanwhile, part of their rate increase request is because they're still using coal, and it's getting expensive. So there you go. It's a mess, but I think if we maybe take the time, not too much time, I don't know, 6 months max, to do a in-depth study that looks at this thing with truly independent experts, and then all those guys in suits that are sitting there yesterday can get, and maybe part of the solution will be to change the senior management. Who knows? Let's let people who know what they're doing have a thorough look at things. Thanks for listening.
Thanks, James. Appreciate it. 902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. I don't normally advocate that the public realm can do things more efficiently than the private realm can. We've seen many instances where services have been offloaded from government, from the public sector to the private sector as a cost-saving measure, and we've seen those kind of services be renationalized, particularly on a countrywide level, and it just creates problem. We know that once the government gets in their mitts into things, they create red tape and a bureaucratic nightmare, and things end up doubling and tripling in cost. But something truly has to be done with this power utility, right? James suggested that we change the leadership structure. Well, can we even do that? It's a private company. So we would have to convince Emera to change it. At least that's my understanding. Independent review needs to be done. It needs to be started yesterday. Is this the realm of the Auditor General? Is this the realm of an expert panel of outside sources? Is this a royal commission? I don't know if that's even possible, but something has to be done, right? James listed off all of the things that have happened, and that's this year. And then to put the cherry on top, when we have a public review of these proposed rate increases, you bench the senior administrators and shield them from answering questions. It's bizarre. We're back after the news. All right, welcome back. Open Hour continues. Lines are open. 902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. Your opportunity to chat about whatever it is on your mind. We'll go directly to the phones and welcome Dave to the show. Dave, how are you?
Yes, good morning, Dan. Thanks for taking my call. Just Nova Scotia Power, let's just remind folks where we get our power from. Here in Halifax is Tufts Cove, those three smokestacks, if you will, on the Dartmouth side there. And it's generated, the electricity that is, by coal and American natural gas. And I think it's a shame that in this country, we're filthy rich, wealthy with natural resources that is virtually untapped, including Nova Scotia, where now we're scrambling and thinking about fracking. Because the richness, the wealth is in the ground, from my understanding, according to Tim Houston.
Right.
And he also claimed that the natural gas that we do get is every drop is from the United States, and it's how we got ourselves in this predicament. Goodness only knows. Maybe just poor governance over the last decade or more. Now, I want to just talk about sovereignty, if I may,
Sure.
because we're talking about Greenland here.
Yeah.
Just ask our First Nations how they feel about sovereignty. And I'm not taking the blame myself, and I'm not First Nations, but they're not even getting fresh drinking water in some of their communities. Many, and that's been promised to those folks for maybe the last couple governments. And that has not been addressed. So when it comes to sovereignty, and we're pointing fingers at sovereignty, look at the First Nations, how they have suffered. And generally, I don't think of that. But because I've sort of looked up sovereignty, when it comes to Greenland, does anybody understand what China's doing? I mean, if you do a little bit of research, and Dan, I'm sure you're very knowledgeable, and see what China's doing with their Belt and Road Initiative. Belt and Road Initiative. They are moving their empire or expanding their empire. And I think truly they want to be the number one superpower. They've even made claim to that eventually. And they just might. And if you look at where they've developed ports, and what they do is they go into like African poor countries and offer them ports and transportation and rail, what have you, loan them money that they can't pay back, and eventually China works their way into those situations. And you can look at that in South America. It's very similar down there. Just do a little homework on the Belt and Road Initiative. It's really quite interesting. We're seeing a massive geopolitical shift, and we're kind of stuck in the middle of it. And quite frankly, I think we're in slow motion. A motion that we should have been in a faster gear quite a while ago, like years ago. But instead, we pranced around and thought everything was going to be just ducky until now. So to me, I think just a lack of progress in this country. And now we're scrambling. And I gather, is it Carney? Is he going to be over in China and hopefully reduce those tariffs on canola and our seafood?
Let's hope.
I gather. Yep, and don't forget, China has levied some horrendous tariffs on us. We talk about Trump down south. Well, China has done the same to us here. So what are we going to get in return from China? You know, and with the Venezuela thing, Dan, one more thing. If they're going to move their heavy crude, the U.S. that is, and Venezuela, in cooperation of, to the refineries in Louisiana and Texas, which is dozens of them, I think at least 16, 19, operating, need that heavy bitumen crude oil that Venezuela has, what are we going to do? We don't have a pipe that can move it to the coast of British Columbia or what have you. And then from where is that going to go? Are we going to feed China? Are we going to feed Asia with it? I don't know. So we're in a real predicament that probably could have been resolved if we had just thought about things a little bit earlier in governance and prepared for. This was going to happen eventually, right? As the world churns and turns, Dan. And I think also what we've seen with, and you're a military man, you were, and I think you would consider yourself still, in some sense. You saw what capabilities that Trump had in the U.S. military with Iran, which is now shifting as well, by the way, folks. And maybe that's not a bad thing. Venezuela, same thing. Clinical, absolutely clinical. If you're into that stuff, and I'm not a warmonger, but not a single American life was lost here, and hopefully never will be. But there could be. But we're seeing a massive shift, and we're stuck in the quicksand here, sadly. And sometimes people, and I hear people talking about the 51st state. You know, when our socialist system is failing us, high taxes, again, billing, this has nothing to do with Trump. This power rates, the water rates, our property taxes, this is not Trump. This is just from poor governance on ground level, both provincially, municipally, and federally. And we're now blaming everything on the man down south. And people are warming up to possibly becoming, I hate to say it, but when you're waiting a year for surgery, Dan, in this province.
Yeah, but I mean, Dave, if we're going to become a 51st state, we may not be waiting a year, but we're going to go bankrupt when we go to the hospital, right?
Well, I'm not too sure. They have a system down there. I don't believe
they don't have universal health care. That's for darn sure.
Well, they have Obamacare for the poor people. They do get care when you're at the lower end there. And again, people should do the research on that. I have relatives in the United States that are working for companies, and even Walmart offers a medical opportunity as well. If you work, but there is, again, how is our system, Dan? I guess that's where you have to. And by the way, I don't think we're going to become a 51st. I can't see it. But the way this world is turning, and our back is against the wall at this point in time, and we've lacked in the military. We can't protect our Arctic. Putin's already laid down a flag up in the Arctic near the Northwest Passage. That's going to open up. Who's going to protect us up there? Do you want Russia? Do you want China? I guess that's where we're going to have to decide, or the Americans. I don't know. It's sad that we've got ourselves in this situation. I say ourselves because we're all involved in this, and it is a scary situation. But I don't think I would fear too much that we're going to become a U.S. Look, we've got companies, corporations in this country already, which are mostly American, right? Big companies that are American. So, you know, I think we're going to be okay.
All right.
Thanks, Dan. Appreciate it.
Have a good one. 902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. I'll disagree with Dave. I don't think that many in Canada are warming to the possibility of a 51st state. I think that I said it earlier today on a study that showed a majority of Canadian parents think that 90% of Canadian parents think that their kids spend too much time on their phones. And I said that Canadians don't agree on much these days. I think it's pretty safe to say that there is pretty strong consensus in this country that we don't ever want to be the 51st state of the United States of America. I think you can probably take that one to the bank. We're back after the break. All right, welcome back. 902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. An email to read before we go back to the phones comes to us today from Rob, and it reads, neither the CEO of Nova Scotia Power nor the Premier felt it necessary to show up before the Nova Scotia Energy Board to answer questions about the proposed rate hike. The reason is the backroom deal is already struck between all of the stakeholders to agree to the rate increase, but that doesn't mean that Peter Gregg and the Premier don't have an obligation to be questioned by the board, even if the rate increase is a foregone conclusion. It certainly looks like an adaptation of leadership responsibilities, and I dare say that given this situation, the Premier has no moral basis to continue in his public outrage about these increases. And that comes to us today from Rob. It is still it's mind-blowing to me that this is what we're watching, with all of the stumbles and all of the issues with Nova Scotia Power, to not have anybody. And it's not like it would be out of the ordinary for the executive at Nova Scotia Power to face questions. It has been done in the past. In fact, those that have been doing these for years saying having them not available is unprecedented. What is going on? 902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. Hello, Jamie.
How are you today?
I'm good. What's on your mind?
Well, I just wanted to call about Nova Scotia Power. I'm hearing a lot of different viewpoints, people thinking about public ownership, and that might be, including yourself, that might be, the way to go to solve some of these problems. I could not possibly disagree with that more, although I have respect for your opinion. And the reasons why is because we've, been there, done that. Right. So we've been there, done that. Nowhere that I know of, anywhere in the world, does public ownership work out better than capitalistic competition.
Right. But there is no competition in the power sector.
If we had 4 or 5 smaller companies,
right,
and people could go from like a Bell Alliant at I think we're paying $275 a month. If you just need internet, I think you can go to Purple Cow for $69.
Sure.
And the reason why that works is because it's competition, right?
Yeah.
So competition always has been and always will be the answer to that problem. And if as a customer we have the freedom to choose, if you're annoyed with Nova Scotia Power, you simply
switch teams,
like moving your bank accounts from the Royal to BMO or Scotiabank or vice versa. You just say, I'm done with you guys. I'm getting a better deal over here. So have a nice life, right?
Yeah.
So and I think at that point that would work out better for us. I'm an electrician. When I get into business 16 years ago, if you wanted a service upgrade done to your house, we could call on Tuesday and probably have it done Thursday or Friday. That's with permits and trucks and everything in place. Now the process is literally months.
Right.
Right. And it's been getting progressively worse. And if I call them today, the reason that they would give me is because they're so busy. And I'm not faulting the people at Nova Scotia Power. I deal with them every day. They're lovely, right? But they give you the excuse that they're busy, right? And they are, but they've been busy for a dozen years. At what point is it not, okay, I'm busy now? Well, okay, well, now we can anticipate the number of lines trucks. And by the way, they can't read your meters because they went to all these digital meters here a few years ago, and now they don't have any more meter people, or very few.
Yes.
So they had a whole staff of meter people that have been done away with as a result of the digital meters.
And now they're hiring them back.
Well, I don't know that they are, and if they are, it's only temporary. But
right.
But had they stayed on the old system, your power bills would have been read as per normal, because I don't think Russia has the ability to hack the employees yet.
Not yet, anyway.
So anyway, my point is that competition. I think you've got a group of MBAs at Nova Scotia Power, and they're treating it like a project in school, and trying to milk every dollar out of this on paper company here. And I think they're going to milk their way right out of the province. If I were the premier, I would I'd take the bottom right out from under them. But if it were me, but whatever the cost for that, I don't know. Maybe I wouldn't once I knew the cost. But in any case, you don't want to be vengeful, but at the same time, just competition, I think, would just rock these people's worlds. I genuinely believe that. So I hope state ownership, man, if you like that system, please, Cuba, the Soviet Union, there's better places for you than here, right? So, and that's my opinion.
All right, Jamie, appreciate it.
Thank you. Have a great day.
902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. I think I put a caveat on it when I suggested that maybe we should look at public ownership of Nova Scotia Power. My experience with it is that it never is cheaper. But I think that something has to be done, and maybe his solution is the right solution. But how do you It's not like you can just make power. I mean, there's massive costs to make power, and there's massive costs for distribution, and there's massive costs associated, and there's grid ownership, and there's all of these problems, right? So I get it. I know when things are nationalized that they don't. They very rarely is an instance where a crown corporation is efficient and makes money, but something has to be done, right? Hello, Brian.
G'day, Dan. How are you today?
I'm good. What's on your mind?
How much? It's another solar day, if you believe it or not.
What's on your mind?
Yeah, I was thinking, for as far as competition goes, microgrids. We got so many municipalities around this province that we can do microgrids to supply at least 30-40% of our power to these municipalities. It's not an expensive option. They're doing it in Pakistan. They're doing it in Brazil. In Brazil, it's code that if you build a new carport, you have to have solar panels on it. They're even doing it in Iqaluit right now. They got a project in Iqaluit. They got cut down on diesel by 40%. They're building a solar field with a microgrid.
Right.
That's where we should be pushing. Like our municipalities, the HRM, the province, you can't regulate the sun. You can't store it. You can't control it. And microgrids are really not a huge cost for a municipality that have taxpayers and so forth.
So would the municipality build its own solar farm? Is that kind of where you're going?
Yeah, right? Just think outside the box, because they're doing it in Pakistan. All these third world countries are now like 80% solar because they don't have oil in their countries. They don't have gas. So these big companies aren't pushing it down. So if a third world country like Pakistan can do it, how can a province like us, we can't do it? It's not a massive thing.
It's a fair point, Brian.
Yeah.
It's a fair point.
And I'd love to say, I got a book, and it's called Here Comes the Sun by Bill McKibben. I'd love to send it to you. It's just written. He's a very good author when it comes to the solar, about how the countries are keeping it down, other countries are letting it thrive. And I'd love for you to read it. A lot of numbers, but it's a good book. It's an eye-opener.
Well, I appreciate that, Brian. Appreciate the call, too.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. 902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. Maybe that's the way. Maybe, as I was just saying, creating competition. There was an election campaign in this province run on creating or breaking the monopoly of Nova Scotia Power. And that was one of the Stephen McNeil terms. And that just never happened. And we have solar. We have the Premier's obviously looking at wind. There's still developments being made in tidal power, and maybe that's what it is. Around my neighborhood, and I'm sure every neighborhood's like this, I'm seeing more and more people installing solar panels on the roofs of their houses, right? So maybe that's part of the incentive. But to be completely reliant on the monopoly that is Nova Scotia Power, it's obvious that it's not working. Last word today goes to Greg. Greg, how are you?
Not bad, sir. How are you?
I'm well. What's on your mind?
Oh, I always kind of laugh when people talk about Nova Scotia Power and what they're doing. I mean, it's like we're a bunch of, that's the only power source we have in the province. So it's like, we're like a bunch of peasants. It's like, when Nova Scotia Power says jump, we say how high because that's all we have.
Right.
Right? So, and that's it's quite sad to know that they can pretty much, after all this cyber attack, and now they're doing estimates instead of actually telling us how much the bill is. Now it's an estimate. We got to guess how much actually it is, and then to be able to say, yeah, we're going to put her up in the midst of all that is mind blowing, right?
It is.
But like I said, where else do you get it?
Well, that's just it. We're kind of stuck, right?
Take care, boss.
All right, man. Cheers.
And another thing I was thinking too was I was listening earlier about the cell phone usage, and the teenagers from 11 to 17 are using it 5 hours a day.
5.2 hours. Yep.
5.2 hours a day.
A day.
And it's just mindless scrolling and information, right?
Yeah.
Between TikTok and Facebook and Instagram. I mean, it's hard because, I'm a big sports fan. I love watching sports. But it's so bad that you can And me and 100 million other people can lay in bed at night. And you can scroll and scroll and scroll all night. Right?
You bet.
And
That's what the algorithm does. That's what it's designed to do.
It's a sad world when it comes to that, man. Like I do Uber Eats, I deliver around town, and I'll go into a breakfast place on the weekend, and the first thing I see these couples sitting at the table, and instead of talking, the two of them are waiting for their meal and they're playing on their phones.
Right.
It doesn't matter if you're at the bus stop, at the airport. Everybody is buried into these phones for literally mindless. It's just a bunch of nothing, right?
You bet.
And it's and I think COVID. I really think COVID had something to do with it too, because we all had our little buddy system. We all kind of got in our own ways of not going out and not doing nothing. So the hours of mindless scrolling became something people enjoyed. And now, like I said, it's a strange way of life out there now, man. Like I said, there's and how do you curb it? I mean, I agree with it. Take the phone away from the kids as much as possible. It's a crazy way of life out there.
All right, Greg, appreciate it, sir.
Take care, boss.
902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. Remember those numbers, because we're going to do this again tomorrow at the same time. The Friday free-for-all will take flights to wrap up the work week, and I look forward to having our conversations. When we come back, we'll have a conversation with one of the people that's running for the leadership of the federal New Democrats. Rob Ashton will be here. You're listening to The Todd Veinotte Show. I'm Dan Ahlstrand. We're back in minutes. Welcome back to hour number 3 of the program as we roll along on the Friday Eve edition of the Todd Veinotte Show. I'm Dan Ahlstrand. Glad you're able to stick around and join us here as we get you set up for your weekend. And boy, there's a lot of things going on politically these days. And I don't want to say that some of the domestic issues have kind of been shifted off of the front burner to the back burner, but I will suggest that there are some significant political events that are happening in this country in the next 3 months that could change the way and the direction of things, particularly in Ottawa. We know that the Conservative Party is having their leadership review with Pierre Poilievre this month, and the NDP is going to pick its next leader in March. And we've had some conversations with some of the candidates that have thrown their hats into the ring for the job, which was most recently held by Jagmeet Singh. And we're going to continue that conversation right now, and we welcome into the studio today and welcome him to Halifax, and that is Mr. Rob Ashton. Rob, how are you?
I'm doing really good. Thanks for having me here. I appreciate it. And if I can, before we get into it, I just want to give a quick shout out to the workers at Ubisoft. They just unionized, and Ubisoft, which is a strike union busting company apparently. Shame on them for leaving this beautiful city and leaving those workers in a lurch.
71 people.
Yeah, it's disgusting and it's horrifying.
Rob, tell me a little bit about yourself. Tell our listeners a little bit about you and why you decided that now was the time to throw your hat into the ring and into federal politics.
You bet. I've been a longshoreman in Vancouver for 32 years. I've been the national president of the ILW Canada for the last 10, and I'm angry. I'm angry that a guy like Pierre Poilievre can pretend he's a worker, and people are buying it. I'm angry that our party forgot how to talk to workers, forgot how to talk to Canadians, and that's what I want to bring to this party. Right? I want to be able to go into places where we historically have forgotten to go to. I want to go back into schools and colleges and universities and have those conversations with up-and-coming voters. But most importantly, I want to bring Canadian jobs back to Canada, Canadian industries, and shipbuilding is one of them. Right? I come from the maritime industry. And if we start building ships that work in Canadian waters, like on the Great Lakes, the towboats here, ferries, build them all in Canada and use Canadian products with Canadian workers, imagine the jobs that we can create in this country, right? And beer, ships and beer, just like this province. And housing, of course.
Fair. Rob, obviously voters in Canada sent the NDP a message during the last election. Where did the party go wrong?
Like I said before, it was communication. Right? We got a lot of good things done in the last government. The party, the NDP, got dental care, we got pharmacare, we got anti-scab legislation, but we forgot how to talk to our people, and we allowed the Liberals to co-opt that message, to take over that message. The Liberals wouldn't have done anything if, we've been trying to get those things for decades, and just now, so they could stay in power, we got it. The NDP did. And the other part of it is when Pierre starts talking about this 20-year plus politician saying that he represents workers, he understands workers. And we never pushed back hard enough on that because the NDP is the party of workers. The NDP, the founding father of the CCF, was a longshoreman out of Vancouver, J.S. Woodsworth. We are the workers' party, and we have to get back to that. And so when people split off to go vote for the Conservatives, a lot of people went and voted for the Liberals to keep Pierre out of office and to figure, well, Carney's going to be a big help against Trump. And what's he done? Not a whole heck of a lot. So we are the party of change. You vote Conservative, you vote Liberal, you're getting the exact same thing. But you vote the NDP, we have proven, and we're going to keep proving, that we are the party of change federally and provincially.
Housing crisis obviously is top of mind for many people, particularly here in Nova Scotia, but right across the country. I think is probably one of, if not the big talking point these days. What's your solution for the housing crisis here in Canada?
Build, and build. So we built houses after the wars. And that's what we want to get back to. We want to get back into building houses like we did after World War II, World War I, where we're building triple the amount of housings that triple now. They're not building any right now federally. But we want to build hundreds of thousands of homes across this country using Canadian products, Canadian wood, Canadian wiring. And if there's no wiring companies in this country, we're going to build them. Right? Put us to work, put people in homes, but not where you got to come in and you got to spend $600,000 on a home in Halifax, where you're going to be able to move into a publicly funded home, co-op style, that kind of stuff, where people can actually afford to live. And maybe even because they can afford to live in a home that's not $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 a month, they might actually be able to go on a vacation. They might actually be able to buy a steak once in a while. This is our housing plan. And we can do it. I know we can do it because we've done it before.
Oil has been in the headlines this week, as a matter of fact, with the American operation in Venezuela and the discussion over or heavy crude and bitumen and oil pipelines have been a discussion, particularly in the western part of the country, which you're familiar with. Rob, your thoughts on pipelines, and should we be in the pipeline business?
So right now, the talk about what's happening with this, in quotations, new pipeline, that the deal that Smith and Carney made by themselves, it's a pipe dream. It's not needed. There's nobody talking about building it, just Smith and Carney. And the people of British Columbia don't want it. The West Coast communities don't want it. They don't think we need it. So if we want to do something with some of the products that were coming out of the ground now, why aren't we refining it? Why aren't we creating secondary jobs to the oil industry? But while we're doing that, Canada has to start building an east-west energy grid to try to slowly move us away from fossil fuels. And why I say slowly is because we can't make effective change to a greener energy system without workers. Because every change that we have to make, we have to bring workers along with it. Because how dare we go into the oil fields or into a mine and say, we're going to take your job from you to a worker. We can't do that. So as we move into a green energy economy, built by Canada, owned by Canada, we're going to bring those workers with us.
Rob, you've been in Halifax for a couple of days now. You no doubt noticed that we're a pretty significant Navy town here and a military town. There's obviously been a lot of discussion about the military these days. What's your thoughts on Canada's military and how we grow it?
So, like I said before, if we're going to build Navy vessels, we have to build them in Canada. Right? And if we don't know how, then we're going to get the expertise to build them. Investment in our military is important. Right? We have to make sure our military people have the ability to have a good wage, have the equipment that keeps them safe, in whether we're doing national defense or whether we're in peacekeeping roles. We have to make sure that our military is in good hands. And anything that we build in this country, militarily wise, should stay in Canada and be used on the Canadian military.
So no military goods to Ukraine or those kind of places.
You know, that's a topic of conversation that is always going to be out there. We do have to help countries defend themselves that are invaded by other countries, because Lord help us all, we've seen what the United States did to Venezuela. If a country decided to invade Canada, we would be hoping that other countries, our allies, would come to defend us as well.
You mentioned President of the United States. Obviously, trade negotiations between our two countries have been frayed, I think is probably the way to describe that the best way. Rob, what's the best approach in dealing with President Trump?
You got to stand up to a bully, and he's a bully. It's hard I would imagine it's hard to deal with him because he changes his mind every 5 seconds. But most definitely, like, I've dealt with bullies from the ruling class my entire adult life. And the key to it is standing up to them. So dropping our counter tariffs or I'm going to probably get in trouble for saying this, but kissing the ring of the self-appointed king doesn't work. We have to show them that Canada is a sovereign nation. Canada and its people in Canada are willing to stand up for ourselves. We're willing to create Canadian industries, just like our jobs promise. And we have to prove to him that we don't need the United States as much as he thinks we do.
More information on Rob available at his website, robashton.ca. Best of luck in the upcoming leadership race. And thanks for coming in today.
Thank you very much for having me, and thanks for hosting me in this absolutely amazing city.
You had a donair yet?
Yes.
See?
The lobster stuff is amazing. The lobster dip is...
There you go. He's got the full Halifax experience. Brought him all the way from the West Coast. Anyway, we're going to take a break. When we come back, cyber threats, what we need to know about 2026 and what the latest scam is that you're going to get on your phone. You're listening to The Todd Veinotte Show. I'm Dan Aalders. We're back in minutes. We've had a bit of a focus today on the digital realm and the cyber world as we see the calendar flip into a new year, into 2026, and we've noticed and we've seen the increase in the prevalence, should I say, of things like artificial intelligence. And the technology, just watching some of the things that they're unveiling at the Consumer Electronics Show in Vegas, it's mind-blowing, really, just the advances that are being made. But not all of the advances that are being made are going to be beneficial, can I say that? And those that are looking to perhaps steal your money, steal your identity, are also getting their fingers onto this new technology. And 2026 can bring with it a whole new host of scams and ways that we can be harmed in the digital world. I'm very pleased to welcome back to the show. We've talked to our next guest from time to time when it comes to what we should be on the lookout for when it comes to cyber threats. We call him the Chief Security Evangelist at ESET. That's Tony Anscombe. Tony, how are you?
I'm very good, thank you, Dan. Good to be here again.
I guess when we think of scams, we tend to think of these things as these these emails that there's spelling mistakes and the logos are wrong and they're pretty awfully done, but they're getting more and more sophisticated and more difficult to determine if these things are legit or not.
They certainly are, with the adoption of some of the AI tools, the availability to cyber criminals. Of course, phishing emails and that are very difficult to spot now. And I think this year we're going to see more deep fake technology used by cyber criminals as well, which will possibly make it even more complex for us to decide what's real and what's not.
Tony, deepfakes are a concern for many, including myself. It doesn't take very long for you to see what they look like these days. I mean, to just check your social media feed, and I see stuff on my Facebook algorithm almost daily where it's you can tell it's fake, but it looks pretty real.
Well, and now imagine a cyber criminal landing an email in your inbox, then with a picture of you in a compromising position, and saying, "I'm going to send this to your relatives or your work colleagues if you don't pay me." And suddenly, AI tools are being used to create images of you that aren't of you, but maybe that you don't want circulated amongst your colleagues because they might think it's you.
Right. How does one protect themselves against that? It must be difficult.
Well, I think on something like that, you get ahead of it. I think in that situation, when somebody puts that into my inbox, I think I'd just email it myself to my colleagues and say, "Hey, look, guys, this is funny. And if they contact you, please treat it as funny because it's not me." So I think you just have to call them out for it.
Right. Ransomware obviously was top of mind here in Nova Scotia over the last year, with our power utility falling victim to a ransomware threat and having some of our data exposed to the dark web. That's not going away anytime soon, is it?
No, unfortunately, ransomware criminals continue to make a lot of money. There are different various mechanisms that they're tracked for how much money they make, but generally it's considered to be around $1 billion a year, so that's US dollars a year. So while there's so much money at stake, they're not going to be going anywhere. Gangs come and go, so some gangs get law enforcement action, some are sanctioned, and then new gangs appear pretty much instantaneously with new code and new means and new tactics to go and attack people. I think realistically, until the money is taken out of that business, they will continue to evolve and they will continue, unfortunately, to come and attack companies. It really is one of those that somebody needs to go follow the trail of the money.
Tony, with regards to our cyber attack here on Nova Scotia Power, the powers that be there have blamed a Russian actor for this cyber attack, this ransomware attack. Does geopolitics factor into this? Is it a big thing to have different countries waging this kind of cyber war on others?
Well, so the question there is it Russian-based or is it Russian?
Right.
So is it attributable to the Russian state, which I very much doubt. State actors don't tend to try and make money. There are some exceptions in that because there are some sanctioned countries in the world where they do try and fund their country from it, most notably North Korea. But Russia doesn't tend to, the Russian state attacks don't tend to need to take money. So it may be cyber criminals based in Russia, and to a certain degree they're hiding under the banner that actually law enforcement can't go and act or get them because of where they're located. But beyond no illusion, they're cyber criminals, not really state actors. They're just hiding in a country where they can't be got at.
I read a study earlier today that showed, particularly with young people, I think it was between 11 and 17, are spending upwards of 5.2 hours a day on their devices, Tony. And obviously, the more time that you're on your phone or you're on your tablet, you're giving an opportunity to fall victim to these scams.
Yeah, absolutely. Of course, the more interaction you have with the different services, and every time you log on to something, every new account you create, you're leaving more and more snippets of your data. There's potential for more phishing scams, etc. So, the more of a footprint you create online, the more potential there is for cyber criminals to come and abuse it. One thing I think we don't do very well as internet users, and I'm including myself in this, Dan, is you go create an account somewhere on the internet, and then you don't use that service. In 6 months' time, you stop using that service. We very rarely go back and delete things. Like, I don't use that account anymore, I'll go back, delete it. We don't remove our snippets of data or those footprints that we leave all over the internet, and we really should be better at that.
Any advice moving forward, Tony, for 2026? How can we protect ourselves?
Well, firstly, make sure you've got good cybersecurity software, because a lot of cybersecurity software will help identify the phishing links, the scams, the deepfake links, etc., and warn you that those things aren't safe. But also make sure you patch machines, especially if you're a small business and consumer. A lot of things will auto-patch, but there's often things lying around your house or in your small business that might need you to patch as well. Cyber criminals will take advantage of vulnerabilities in devices, in software, to gain access, and then, of course, they can unleash ransomware, or they can start scamming you, or if you're a company, steal your data. So make sure you're patching as well.
Tony, is always a pleasure.
Oh, my pleasure. Have a good New Year.
Same to you. That is Tony Anscombe. He is our digital security guru here on the program. Those scams are getting better and better and better. It seems almost hourly now. With the advent of AI and the ability for it to do what it does, it's making it that much more difficult to try and figure these things out. Time for us to take another break. When we come back, can you believe that we've seen 15 straight quarters of positive growth in office space sales in Halifax? We'll get to the bottom of what that means with Bob Mussett from CBRE Halifax, Executive Vice President, when we return. From time to time, we'd like to check in on how things are going in the real estate market, both on the domestic side and on the commercial side here on the program. And we're very pleased to welcome to the show today to share his thoughts, CBRE Halifax Executive Vice President Bob Mussett. Bob, how are you?
Very good, Dan. How are you?
I am well. I guess we've had a pretty significant run here of good news when it comes to office space in our part of the world.
Yes, we just released a report for the nation, and we're seeing positive impact across the country in the office sector, but Halifax is a bit of a standout. We really saw a significant recovery right at the end of the pandemic in 2022, and absorption. We've had 15 straight quarters of positive absorption in the office market, and that's really significant when you look across the country. It's performing very well. So it started in 22 and it's and repeated again in 2025.
Bob, for those that don't understand what it is, what does absorption mean?
Leasing. So people taking more space. Right. So in Halifax, when we look at the market, we break it into two buckets. There's a downtown market, which is about 5 million square feet of office space here in Halifax, and the suburban market, which is a larger portion at about 8 million square feet. So we look at both sectors, and we've seen activity in both, although the suburban market here, and it's a little bit unique in the country, that it's larger, significantly larger than our downtown office market, but it also performs extremely well. Our vacancy downtown still remains at about 14% here, and in the suburban market, it's 8%. So that's really driven by where people live and, the geographic makeup of Halifax with the peninsula, et cetera.
Right. Is this new business? Is this business expanding? Is this people, going back to the office? Is it a combination of all of that?
Exactly right. There's no one single driver. I think the reduction, the pullback by businesses and government across the board during the pandemic was overdone. So we're seeing now users say, "Boy, we've got to grow here to just to get back on a level playing field." We're seeing obviously more offices go back to work, whether it's 3 days or 5 days. There's just more people in the office, and I think that is a trend that will continue. And for Halifax, and it's not true in all markets, but it is here in Halifax, there's no overbuilding. So we've been and we typically are very judicious on how we build in this market. So those are all good factors, and I see this trend continuing.
And that leads me to my next question. How does all this new construction, particularly here on the peninsula that I'm looking out my window at, and we're seeing all kinds of towers going up with commercial space in the bottom of it, how does that factor in?
A lot of that commercial space is either service or retail.
Right.
And this is good news for the city, just to rebalance where the residential product is located. A lot of what you're seeing in those towers is multifamily, mostly rental, but some condominium. So, we know we have a housing issue. We need more product to stabilize the market, to balance the market. So this is great news for the downtown, and I think that will help maybe attract more office users to the urban core, the downtown market, as those apartments get filled with people who want to work close to where they live.
Right. Bob, you mentioned that the office space is better utilized out in the suburban areas than in the downtown core. We have more vacancy in the downtown core. Is that that price? Is that geography? Is that traffic? What is it?
Again, it's all of those. It's all of those things. I don't think it's price. They're very close on pricing. I think, and this happened decades ago when there was not a lot of multifamily or housing constructed on the peninsula, and most of it was happening either in Dartmouth or in the Larry Utech area and Bedford, West Bedford. As that was growing, that's where people lived. And as we added services and more density from a housing standpoint, it was a natural progression that office was built. And so it's traffic, it's where I live, it's where the density is for residential. So that's why I see some balancing happening in the downtown as we add more housing here.
As we head into 2026, obviously technology always plays a role in what we do these days. Will we continue to see demand for office space, or once companies get back to their back to work plans in place, we're eventually going to hit a ceiling?
Well, that's all driven by the broader economy. So I think for Halifax, things continue to look good. We've got a very solid economy here. And I'm quite enthusiastic about Halifax. If we see the federal government deploy the kind of military spending they're talking about, Halifax will be a major benefactor in that regard, and that could be significant, and that will drive office and housing demand.
Could it get to the point where we'll see a shortage?
Yeah, the other thing about our office market here is we have one of the oldest office market supplies in the country. So there's a lot of product that sits in that B and C class, which is just getting to the less efficient to the end of its useful life. So I think there's lots of opportunity. We've seen about 500,000 square feet of space taken off the market, either through reconverting to alternate uses. In many cases, that's been residential, or demolished and rebuilt. So I think there's runway for more of that to happen as well. So I don't think anytime in the near term we're going to see the market running out of space, but I expect to see more shifting take place.
If somebody was, just listening to us right now, Bob, and was wondering about setting up shop in Halifax, what can they expect to pay per square foot for office space in on the peninsula? Our Class A, which is the best in class on the peninsula, is averaging $19.30 a square foot. On the suburban market, it's about $17.20 a square foot. So just under $20.
Average that out, it's $18.50. Right. net rent.
How does that compare to the rest of the country?
It's quite affordable. We've seen another interesting thing in our tracking of trends, not only in Canada but through North America, is Halifax's performance in attracting tech talent, what you were just referring to.
Right.
That is a major user in any market across this country and others. And we've performed extremely well. And I think we're now number 5 in the top 20 markets in North America and up and coming. So we've seen great growth in that sector. I expect that continues. Education plays a big role in tech and IT. We're very well positioned with all of the institutions we have here, educational institutions, to feed into that. So that's another factor that's bright on the horizon, in my view.
Bob, I appreciate your time. Fascinating stuff.
Real pleasure. Thank you, Dan.
Have a great day. That's Bob Mussett. He is the CBRE Halifax Executive Vice President. 15 straight quarters of positive momentum in the office space sector, with more on the horizon. I think that as we continue to unpackage what this military spending thing is going to mean for Halifax, I think this is going to become a bigger and bigger story as we get into the weeds on the actual numbers for that. I think this is going to be a win situation for HRM and the surrounding area. When we come back, we're going to refocus on the Nova Scotia Power hearings yesterday. We had a conversation earlier with the leader of the Liberal Party who was there. The leader of the NDP in Nova Scotia was also an intervener yesterday. A conversation with Claudia Chender when we return. You're listening to The Todd Veinotte Show. I'm Dan Aalders. We're back in minutes. All right, we're back. This is the Todd Veinotte Show, and we're continuing to try and figure out what exactly is happening with regards to these Nova Scotia Power hearings, and had a conversation earlier with Iain Rankin, who was there, and now I'm very happy to welcome back to the show for the first time for 2026, the leader of the official opposition in Nova Scotia, the Nova Scotia New Democrats. That is Claudia Chender. Claudia, how are you?
I'm great. Happy New Year.
Thank you. I have so many questions. I guess your thoughts on having the brass from Nova Scotia Power exempt from answering questions.
I think it was a startling absence. And in fact, when the questioning began in the hearing, that was the very first question that the lawyers for the Energy Board asked the company. They said, "Where's Peter Gregg? Where are your executives? Why aren't they here?" Because it's really unusual. They have always seen it as their responsibility, which I think Nova Scotians also see it as their responsibility, to show up and answer questions. Apparently, they didn't think so yesterday.
Makes you wonder why we're doing this, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think we really saw kind of an absence of leadership yesterday. I think the Premier wasn't there.
Right.
Either in his capacity as Premier or Minister of Energy. We didn't have an intervener opening statement from the province. It was only the opposition parties who made the time to do that. And so, the two people who are really steering the ship in terms of how we deal with our energy, how we can figure out how to afford our bills, how we can fix this mess, Peter Gregg and Tim Houston just decided they didn't need to answer any questions yesterday.
Is there any way that we can compel them to do that?
I'm not clear. I mean, if the Premier decided it was worth his while to actually convene the legislature, we certainly have a lot of questions for him in that forum. So we'll be there before too long. We'll have a budget session, and we'll have the opportunity to once again, as we've been doing for years now, press this government on what they are doing to help Nova Scotians afford their power, because the reality is not an awful lot. We had a heating assistance rebate program that was slashed this year. 46,000 people who got assistance on their bills last year who aren't going to get it this year in the face of an increase. So, I think this government has a lot to answer for, and certainly, we will continue to press them not just to answer the questions, but to do the work that they need to do to rein in this company and make sure that Nova Scotians can have reliable energy that they can afford.
Claudia, you spoke as an intervener yesterday. What did you tell the committee?
Well, just what we're talking about now. I mean, the reality, and this is what we hear from people that we talk to right across the province, is that I think most Nova Scotians would say that they have lost trust in this company. I think in 2024, there was a power outage somewhere in Nova Scotia almost every single day. I was having a conversation yesterday and saying that, when I talk to people in cities like Montreal and Toronto and, other urban cities across our country, the idea that the number of people in Halifax and Dartmouth who have generators in the middle of an urban city in 2025 is ridiculous. We shouldn't have to have generators because our power goes out so much. So, we have unreliable power. We have this crazy data breach that you and I have talked about where people are getting overbilled. And so, our submission to the board was basically in the face of all of this and in the face of the fact that power rates in Nova Scotia right now are much higher than our comparative jurisdictions across the country. And, the Affordable Energy Coalition yesterday said that I think the stat was 43% of Nova Scotians kind of technically can't really afford their energy bills based on the metric that you shouldn't pay more than 6% for energy. So, against that backdrop, the idea that rates should go up right now is ludicrous. And that the board has a lot of tools at their disposal to ensure that affordability is top of mind when they look at this rate increase application, and that hopefully they'll do the right thing for Nova Scotians.
Many people who call this show, Claudia, will suggest that the Energy Board or the UARB in its previous iteration doesn't normally say no to these kind of increases. Are you hopeful that the message is getting through this time around?
Well, I mean, the reality is that the board is really something that is created by government, right? It's something that we have a piece of legislation that says we need to have an energy board and that says what that board can do. And what that points to is that at the end of the day, in order to actually fix this situation, we need this government to take action. So, what the outcome of this hearing will be, I think people are, we heard Chris Benjamin from the Affordable Energy Coalition say this, and many others have, that it's very likely that this rate will go through. But that doesn't mean that we can't deal with this company. And so, we have been pushing this government for an on-bill rebate for folks so that they can just have a reasonable cost for their power. We already have that. We waived the tax. The government has quietly given themselves the opportunity to put that tax back on, which we stand firmly against. But we think that rebate should be expanded right now. That heating assistance rebate cut should be reversed. And we need a full review of this company. This is something we've been pushing for since the Liberal government was in power. This company is not working for us. And no matter how many times the Premier says that it should, the reality is it won't until we make it do that through legislation. And so, this government has a lot of legislative tools at their disposal to review the company, to make sure they work in the public interest, and to create the powers of things like the Energy Board and other bodies so that they can do that. So what we really need is action from the Houston government to rein in Nova Scotia Powers and keep our bills low, which is something that they promised to do in the most recent election, and we have not seen any action on that promise. What should that review look like? Should it be an auditor general? Should it be, a royal commission or something like that? Well, we have legislation before the House that we've introduced a few times. We think it should be an independent expert review. These are utilities are really complex, and if you sit in on this hearing that's happening now or any others, the way that costs are calculated, all of that is it really requires subject matter expertise. But the genesis of the idea for us is that we know that when Nova Scotia Power was privatized in 1992, that the PCs did that because ideologically they felt like it should be private and that it would be better and more efficient and it would serve people better. Well, that hasn't come to pass. But what we also know when they did that is that they didn't do a single economic study to understand actually how this utility could serve us best. And so we're saying, it's been 30 years, 35 years. It's not too late. Let's do that study now. What should the ownership structure look like? How should we be regulating this company? Should it be public or private? Should we own the grid? We have our premier talking about offshore wind and changing the kind of energy we use. But the reality is we have a grid that can't accommodate any of that energy. So even if we start to see all those windmills go up, in the Bay of Fundy or wherever they're going to put them, we won't be able to take advantage of that because our grid has been neglected. And so there's a lot of really hard, complicated conversations that have to happen. And what we're saying is this government needs to show leadership and make them happen now.
Claudia, as always, a pleasure.
Thank you so much, Dan.
That is Claudia Chender. She is the leader of the Nova Scotia New Democrats. It's such a complicated issue, but it's so simple, is that Nova Scotia Power just can't seem to get out of its own way. And by that I mean it something happens, a cyber attack, then a fumble with the information that was handed out, and then 2 or 3 iterations of that, and then the inability to read meters, and then the overestimation on bills, then not paying creditors, and now not appearing before the committee that's been struck to make a decision on its ask for a rate increase. It's baffling to me. I think a review is definitely needed, but I think it needs to be a review with some teeth attached to it. And let's not kid each other. That utility has a significant place in the public trust, and I don't think the public trusts that utility at all anymore. We'll continue the discussion on Nova Scotia Power tomorrow when we do the Friday free-for-all at 11 o'clock. My thanks to Vanessa Vandenez on the other side of the glass for doing the fantastic work that she does each and every day on this show to keep it up and running and moving forward. And dealing with me, who has, what did John call it yesterday? The grade 1A1 man flu? Anyway, we're getting there. Tomorrow's Friday. We're looking forward to it. Get out there and enjoy Nova Scotia, folks. We're lucky to live here. Until then, be well. And remember, be kind to one another.